Well, Stanford it is.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Are you ready for stress-free taxes and most money back guaranteed? Well, head over to turbotax.com today and get matched with your expert. It is game day once again. Postseason play begins tonight for Pat Kelsey's Louisville Cardinals with a quick, sudden rematch with the Stanford Cardinal. We'll preview that matchup, discuss what we learned from the first installment in the season series from, last weekend, and how it could pertain to this game tonight. We'll dive into the two-part weekly mailbag. Some great questions asked this week. Thank you all for submitting those, and we will answer them in the final two segments of the show. This episode being recorded somewhat later on Wednesday evening because we had to see who the Cardinals were going to play in the California-Stanford game. Went down to the wire. Andrei Stojakovic was incredible, scoring almost 40 points in the game against the Cardinal, but Stanford was able to avoid disaster and move on to the next round. They will have a rematch with the Louisville Cardinals from the last regular season game. I don't know what or when the last time Louisville has played a team twice in a row. I'm sure Kelly Dickey would know, but that's pretty intriguing. The Cardinals played Stanford on Senior Day last Saturday. They have about a week off until the quarterfinal round of the ACC Tournament, in which they had a double bye getting that 2 seed, and they are playing, guess who? The Stanford Cardinal. Regardless of who the team was going to play, they're expected to win and win pretty comfortably. I don't really have to explain, but Louisville really can't afford to lose this game. We've had conversations about the Cardinals making sure they put themselves in the best spot for tournament seeding. You don't want to get to that 8-9 seed line because the 1 seeds are pretty tough this year. And if you lose to Stanford tonight, well, then you're going from a projected 6 seed possibly down to that 8 line. I think it's realistic to suggest that to be the case. So you have to win. You can have a completely different conversation about style points, how much you need to win by. But in my opinion, 2 things that matter. Number 1, win the game. And number 2, this kind of goes hand in hand with style points. But more importantly, I just want to see Louisville play better. For the past couple weeks or so, the team has had some struggles with limiting offensive rebounding, defending the 3-point line, giving up too many points in the paint, unforced turnovers, and lackluster 3-point shooting. And I just want to see the team start to put it together again like you saw in mid to late January. And I think that if they do that, well, the margin of victory is going to follow. But I'm not so much worried about, we need to win by this amount, because Louisville won by 20 last time and didn't play particularly well. I just want to see them play their best basketball going into the big dance. And you look at that Senior Day win against the Cardinal last Saturday, and it's true. You won by 20 points. You didn't play particularly well. You didn't have Reyne Smith in that matchup. You shot 22.7% from the 3-point line, and you gave up 12 offensive rebounds, but you did enough to win the game. And that's all that matters. A win is a win. What can we learn from that? Well, from watching the team firsthand, you can learn that the team goes through Maxime Raynaud. First team All-American, had 17 points and 11 rebounds against the Cardinals on Saturday. He's a guy that averages close to 20 and 11, so didn't really get to those season numbers, but still was effective. But goes back to the point of you can limit what he gets, but after watching that first game, I'm like, okay, you don't want to see him go off, but it's like the old you hear about these whole narratives surrounding when Pete Maravich used to play. It's like, Pete Maravich would score an insane amount of points, but as long as you held the other players on the team in check, one guy wasn't going to beat you. Now, I'm not insinuating that Raynaud is Maravich. I'm just drawing the comparison that the team runs on his performances and what he's able to do. Against California, he had 23 points and 8 rebounds, and they won by 5 against the worst team in the conference tournament. So I think I'm going from, yes, you don't want to let him go off, but I think it's more important to shut down the players around him, because even if Raynaud has 17 points and 11 rebounds, they only had 48 points against the Cardinals. If you can make sure that, Ryan Argual, Jalen Blakes, Osiah Sellers, if those 3 guards are, held under a set amount of points, then you're going to put yourself in a great position. The same goes for Chisholm Okpara, who had a good game against Louisville. He had some clutch plays against California. If you are able to keep him in check and just make it to where even if Raynaud does have a 15-point double-double, it's not going to hurt you as much. Now, outside of that, I would probably go out on a limb and say that the Cardinals aren't going to shoot 22.7% from the three-point line again. I mean, they went 5 of 22. But Reyne Smith didn't play. And that's something that I'm looking at, because you go back and look at how Stanford defended Louisville. And I forget who it was that pointed this out. It might have been Taylor Lynch, co-host of Louisville Sports Live. It might have been him. It was definitely someone that stated that, well, Stanford, they're doubling the post. They're eliminating the possibility of penetrating the defense, and they're forcing you to shoot three-pointers, definitely with Reyne Smith out. So I'm hoping that, having played just a week ago, Pat Kelsey and company can adjust and find ways to counteract that. Because if Reyne Smith is unable to go on Thursday, this show's being recorded at about 10 o'clock Wednesday night. So I don't really have an idea of Reyne Smith's availability. I would say he's probably truly questionable. I wouldn't say probable, and I wouldn't say doubtful. We haven't heard much from Pat Kelsey or the coaching staff. Kelsey did mention in the post-game press conference after the Stanford game that Reyne Smith is a quick healer. He had an ankle injury at the College of Charleston and was able to recover rather rapidly, and hoping that that can still be the case in this matchup. But that also brings up the possibility of, okay, you beat Stanford the first time around by 20 without Reyne Smith, and you shot terribly from the three-point line. Now, Stanford did as well. I mean, Stanford had more Louisville had more open shots than Stanford, but the Cardinals still shot 27% from 3. So even though you could make the case that, well, Louisville's not going to shoot that bad, well, Stanford probably won't either. I did think that the Cardinals' three-point perimeter defense last weekend was solid. It's probably the best it's been in definitely a couple games. I would love to have Reyne Smith back, because it brings a different dynamic to this offense. Just the gravity of him on the court, even when that three-point shot's not falling, the gravity of having him on the court allows Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards and Javon Hadley to operate in more space, because teams have to respect. Like, you can't, sag off of you can't sag off of Reyne Smith like you can other players because he has such a quick release. He doesn't need much space to get that shot off, and he can make shots in a variety of ways and some really tough shots. So I like Louisville in this game. I'm interested to see what that spread's going to be like. I imagine it's still going to be in that 9.5, 10.5, 11.5 range. Could change with or without Reyne Smith. Not sure, but I think this is a favorable matchup. And Stanford just played a full, intense game the night before. So we don't talk as much about fatigue in these conference tournaments. Well, at least we haven't on this show because when Louisville's been in the conference tournaments, they've been one and done. But fatigue is real. And Stanford played 40 minutes of a high-intensity ball game last night. You look at the minutes distribution in that game. More specifically, Maxime Raynaud. Raynaud played 38 of the 40 minutes. Osiah Sellers played 34 of the 40 minutes. So who knows how much fatigue can come into play, but it does work to the Cardinals' advantage, and we will recap what happens in this game, hopefully a win, on the episode tomorrow. But I felt bad because I was trying to get the mailbag in earlier in the week, but there was a lot of football recruiting news. I had to talk about that, right? So we're going to answer the mailbag questions before Louisville starts conference tournament play because some of these questions do pertain to Louisville potentially making a run. And we'll answer 2 of the 5 when we come back on this pregame edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Me every day. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes into play, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on going out to eat and fast food. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com using the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Also, before we get into the next segment, I want to take the time to tell you about our friends over at Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize the meats to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, you name it. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege, 50 off, and use the code LockedOnCollege, 50 off, to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's the code LockedOnCollege, 50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege, 50 off, to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. I've mentioned it the past couple of weeks, but the mailbags have definitely continued to get better and better. Really thought-provoking questions, and I want to thank you all for asking those. And we're going to take the time to answer 2 in this segment and 3 in the next one. The first one was asked last week: who can and who can't come back? Can you discuss the scholarship distribution of who can return for next season? And that's been a question that some people have had. And if you go back and look at the players who 100% cannot come back, you're talking about Noah Waterman, Frank Anselmibe, and Terrence Edwards Jr. Those players cannot come back under any circumstance. You also have I'm sorry, Abubakar Traore, I believe, is in that group as well. But Traore, Reyne Smith, and Chucky Hepburn have all run out of eligibility. And the only way that they could come back would be if the NCAA passed this 5 to play 5, or like you have 5 years to play 5 years. So those 3 players could be granted an additional year of eligibility if that were to pass. But of course, you're going up against the clock, and I just don't see that passing in time. So likely, the players that you're going to 100% be without next year: Noah Waterman, Frank Anselmibe, Terrence Edwards Jr., Chucky Hepburn, Reyne Smith, and Abubakar Traore. That is 6 players. Now you have 2 other players that were going to be without eligibility, but the JUCO rule passed that you would get an additional year if you ran out of eligibility, but were at a JUCO in some point in your career. That's Javon Hadley and Kason Pryor. Now, Pryor could have potentially gotten a medical red shirt, but it doesn't matter now since the JUCO ruling gives he and Hadley the opportunity to come back for one more season. So whether or not they do so or not, that's still up in the air. You have Ali Khalifa and Kobe Rogers coming off of their redshirt seasons, so they will be available to play next year, obviously. And then Corin Johnson will likely have 2 years of eligibility, James Scott with 2, and Kenai Roots with 3. So basically, everyone else can come back except for Waterman, Frank, Terrence, Chucky, Reyne, and Abubakar. So great question, though. Second question: would you rather play a easier road to the ACC championship or a more challenging one in the ACC tournament? I guess it's based upon your priority and preference. Do you prefer that you get to the conference championship by any means? Because if that's the case, you're probably going to want the easier path. Or are you in the line of thinking that, yeah, we've made the tournament, but we still need to improve our net ranking and strengthen our tournament resume to get a higher seed, so you're going to want to play Clemson and Duke? And that's where I'm at. I am a fan of the latter because, of course, it would be nice to see the Cardinals win their first ACC championship game. I mean, they still can, even if they have the most challenging path, but beating Clemson and or Duke would do wonders for your resume, for your net ranking. And if I'm the Cardinals, I'm trying to get into that 4 to 6 line. I think that they're going to be there regardless, unless they lose to Stanford. And I just want to make sure they're in the most advantageous spot next week when NCAA tournament play starts. So put it this way. Here's a hypothetical. Would you take a win over Stanford, a win over Clemson, and a loss to Duke? Or would you take a win over Stanford, a win over SMU, and then a win over North Carolina? That's a tough question because I kind of go back and forth. On one hand, it's like, okay, well, you win the games in front of you, but a loss against Duke's not really going to hurt your resume, but you get that win over Clemson. And Clemson is a team in the top 25 in the net. It's a quad 1 victory. And now you're like, okay, you lost in the conference tournament, sure, but it was to Duke. So, oh well. But you beat Clemson. It gives you another resume boosting win. I just don't know that wins over SMU and North Carolina would equal that of a win against Clemson. I don't think it would hurt you. Don't get me wrong. Like if the second were to happen, like if you went out in the conference championship and you don't play Clemson or Duke, but you go 3-0, I mean, no one's going to be apologizing. Well, actually, Louisville fans are required to apologize to those fans that continually bring up their lack of conference ranked wins. So take it from me, And I think I speak for the entire fan base when we talk to either Kentucky fans or Duke fans or whoever it is. We are so very sorry, and we hope that you accept our apology. Anyways, when we come back, we got 3 more questions on the 2-part mailbag episode. We'll be right back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Well, now Taxes is matching with the TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates. So you can go throughout your day and focus on that. And an expert will find you every deduction possible and file every form, investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, wondering, or worries. This is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. It's only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Cardinal fans, want to take the time again to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Tomorrow's show, it's all about recapping the quarterfinal game and hopefully previewing the semifinal matchup and discussing what is at stake in that particular game. First question of this one, do you think playing Stanford so recently is an advantage or a disadvantage? That's a really good question. I mean, I trust Pat Kelsey and the coaching staff who have shown that they can adjust and counteract what other teams are doing out of timeouts, late in game. And I think that it gives you a little bit of an advantage because if Reyne Smith plays, I mean, Stanford has to alter their defense and alter the way they play Louisville, but the Cardinals are going to be business as usual. So I went back and forth here. I'm going to say it was an advantage because I think that the Cardinals are the better team and they're going to be able to know what they're going to get from Stanford. And it's theoretically could help Stanford as well, but I would side with the better team here. So I'm going to go with it being an advantage. How much would running the table in the ACC tournament raise the Cardinals' seeding in the NCAA tournament? Well, it depends on who you play. Right now, according to the most reliable bracketology projections out there, the Cardinals are a 6 seed. And let's say, okay, let's use the 2 hypotheticals. Let's say they beat Stanford, and then they beat SMU, and then they beat North Carolina. Will they still be a 6 seed? As a team that's number 23 in the net ranking, I don't know that they're going to rise up too much more. So I would say that their ceiling would be a 5, but more likely they're still a 6 or they're one of the lowest 5 seeds. Now, the other side of this is that Louisville beat Stanford, and then they beat Clemson, and then they beat Duke. And that Duke win would be insanely significant. And the Clemson win would be too. That's a quad 1 win. And so would the Duke win. That's 2 quad 1 wins. The tournament committee would get a front row seat to watch you on the biggest stage handle 2 really good teams and potentially the best team in the country in Duke. And you go from a 6 seed to, I think, at the very worst, a 5, potentially a 4. Could you get up to the 3? I don't know. That might be a little bit too rich. I think that you could squarely be in the 4 seed conversation. I'd be okay with that as a 4 seed. So I don't feel like it is shocking to suggest that it could also depend on what other teams do around the top 25 in the net ranking. It's just so hard to predict because the net ranking isn't the only thing taken into consideration. It feels like the criteria just continually changes. The goalposts shift all the time. And I don't know. Biases are real, especially with Louisville not making the tournament in the 2020-2021 season, but that's water under the bridge. I think that regardless, if you win the ACC tournament, you're going to be a 5 seed at the least. That's kind of going to be my take on that. So, how does Reyne Smith's injury potentially impact Louisville's tournament run this week? Well, it depends on, like, he might not play against Stanford, but then he might play against Clemson. It gives the Cardinals their best 3-point shooter. It opens up so much offensively. It takes more pressure off of Chucky Hepburn, Javon Hadley, and Terrence Edwards. It doesn't allow teams to crowd the paint and force the Cardinals to beat them from the perimeter. Like, the gravity of having Reyne on the court is something that cannot be overstated. Now, if he were to miss, then things become increasingly more difficult because Clemson is a team that scores a good amount of points. They shoot the ball well. Duke is a really good defensive team. So if you don't have the ability to stretch the floor and make those shots from deep, well, maybe you can, but not having Reyne Smith, you're not going to be at your strongest. I mean, it plays a huge impact. It's all really depending on matchups, but of course, Louisville is going to be at its best if their best shooter, one of the best shooters in the conference, one of the best shooters in the country, is on the court for the Cardinals. So, can you get away with beating Stanford without Reyne Smith? I think there's a good possibility. You just did it. You beat him by 20. You didn't shoot the ball that well. But can you beat Clemson without Reyne Smith? Can you beat Duke without Reyne Smith? Now you get into the tough questions because beating those two teams who are both playing extremely well, like Louisville's playing really well. They've only lost once since mid-December. Clemson's playing arguably just as well. They beat Duke. Yes, they lost to Georgia Tech in February right after Louisville did. Yes, they lost to Louisville in January, but Brad Brownell's team is looking really good. And the Duke Blue Devils are continuing to look like a buzzsaw. So Reyne Smith's availability could be theoretically the difference between the Cardinals beating Clemson or not beating Clemson, or beating Duke or not beating Duke. So I would say that the impact is pretty significant here. So with the game tonight being at 7:00, if Louisville does indeed win, they won't know who they play until after the 9:30 game. So I'm going to do my best to try to record either late on or later tonight or early Friday morning to where we can have a recap and a potential preview well ahead of the Friday night matchup. We'll also talk a little bracketology too. So that is going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the game. Thursday edition of the show. Game tonight, pregame. Go Cards. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.